whoa, what are you doing? We can't use that. We'll get, like, sued or something. Just start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Let's Get Real, the weekly show where three dudes talk about movies, entertainment, and everything in between. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we do not, but it is always a good time. I'm Nick.
I'm Will.
And I'm Tom.
And today, as always, we're going to start off with our movie news segment. And there's something going on right now that I think we feel is important enough to dedicate the entire segment to this week, as opposed to breaking it up into multiple news stories. For those who are unaware, there is a possible strike, a possible nationwide strike that is going to happen in the entertainment industry that would pretty much affect all of entertainment. The union in question is called IATSE, and it is basically the biggest union that there is, I believe, in the entertainment industry, that covers most of the crew who works on movies, TV shows, stage, I believe also is under their umbrella. More or less what is going on has to do with the streaming services specifically, is my understanding. It appears that there were contract negotiations that came up between the union and between the studios. And the studios were asking for things that the union and I think many of the people in the union felt were unreasonable. What that basically means is that, so streaming services are considered what's called new media. And that term basically means that, like, this is media that is not old media, meaning like traditional cable television, traditional television networks. And the phrase came into existence, at the dawn of the streaming boom, but that's been around for a while now. And apparently, because they're labeled new media, they're able to get away with demanding more of the people that they hire to work on these productions than old media would. And things like longer hours, less pay, not the safest working conditions all the time. And so obviously the people who are in the union are fighting against that, and they have brought their proposal forward, and they've said the things that they want, and basically said if the studios don't acquiesce, then they're going to go on strike. So that's kind of the situation in a nutshell, as best that I can understand it. And I've talked to a couple of my friends. I know you guys also have friends. We all have friends that are in unions and work in the industry. What do you guys think about all this?
You want to go, Tom? You want me to go?
I just want to say this. I think that we all know that with streaming services, everything is in a bit of a it's been the Wild West for a long time. And then, everybody now has a streaming service. Every single one of these studios have their own streaming services, everything there. And everybody's making different monies. So the biggest thing is this. I just think everybody needs to be paid their fair share. If you're working longer,
Hours.
if you're working longer hours and everything, then I feel that everybody just needs to be fairly compensated for the work that they're doing, and that's really what anyone is really looking for here. That's just the way I see it. I think it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cut and dry too, to a large extent. This could get ugly. I mean, this could potentially put a stop to all production in Hollywood, if you want to look at it that way, because IATSE is, so for those that don't know what IATSE is, it's the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees that also covers motion pictures employees, and it's basically the crew of these stage and film companies. And right, you guys are dead on. We're talking about Netflix and Apple TV and Disney Plus, although I doubt Disney Plus has the same issue, but for some of these Hulu, I mean, all these streaming services, they were experimental, so they didn't think they could charge as much for people, so they could then go in at a lower budget for production. But now, I mean, we all know streaming services are the way of the future, right?
Right.
There's no denying it now. So I think we're at a cross point. What do you call it? What do you call it? Crossroads. We're at a crossroads.
Yeah, crossroads. That's it.
We're at a crossroads. Where it's going to go ugly, and then eventually they're going to have to negotiate to save production.
Right.
Remember a long time ago when the writer's strike happened?
I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The writer's strike ruined like my favorite shows.
That was ugly. But what they did was what Hollywood did
ugly.
was they got scabs to come and start writing for them, and of course the quality was not as good and all that kind of stuff. I foresee the same thing happening. I think I'm going to see people who have always wanted to be in the production industry but couldn't break in, and it's just going to be like when the NFL had the strikes, and they brought in the people who weren't really good football players.
Yeah, and replacements.
It's going to be the same thing, and eventually, I can only imagine Hollywood's going to go, you know what? Fine, we'll negotiate. But from my understanding, they're just not willing to negotiate right now. The reason why they're at an impasse because they're just not willing to negotiate anymore. They've walked away from the table.
Unfortunately, I think you're absolutely on the money. Here's the thing: people in power don't just like decide to just start sharing the money with you. You know what I mean? Like that they almost every time there has to be that period where they have to learn to live without you and then finally get to that point where they go, okay, fine. You know, after so many after they've ruined these television shows and ruined these seasons. I remember that's how it went with the writer's strike. They had great television ratings, great television shows, and then because they, I guess, wanted to call the bluff of all the writers and everything, or I guess the idea that, well, we'll bring in these new people who have always wanted to be writers and give them a shot. I mean, you know, the crazy thing about how hard it is to break into the entertainment business is also one of those things that kind of lets you know, the really talented people. You know, there's a lot of people who got there on a lot of breaks, and it's all about who you know and everything there. But you still have to be a really talented, really driven person,
no doubt,
to do that job.
Yep.
And so the idea that you could just bring on anybody who's just had a dream and put them in that position. I mean, you actually had a better shot of it with the writer's strike than you do on the full production of everything, and it didn't go well then. So I could only imagine how this is going to go if it gets to that point. I hope they don't.
Yeah, well, and with the writer's strike, I was just going to say that was, for those who don't know, I mean, that was really what ushered in the age of what they call and what we now know as unscripted TV.
Right.
That's where we got that proliferation of shows like Pawn Stars and all of these. I mean, that was probably the biggest one that came out of that era.
I would say Survivor. Survivor was the very first one that came out back in the day.
I mean, that was in the earlier 2000s, but I think the writer's strike was like 2006 or 7, right?
Yeah.
That was when and so in the years kind of after that, like in the very late 2000s, early 2010s, you just saw a lot more. It was kind of like those reality shows like Survivor, but they called it unscripted because you could just go in there and you didn't have to hire a writer to do anything. If it was Pawn Stars, you just go, okay, here's the situation. You can kind of come up with it on the fly because the studios are just like, we don't ever want to be in this position again where these people go on strike and we're losing all this money. Cause again, that's what they care about at the end of the day is the money. And so it's a weird thing because like, I'll just admit I used to love Pawn Stars back in the day. That was like one of my favorite shows, but it's a weird feeling. Well, it's a weird feeling because in a way that thing came about just as a result of people denying other people very basic and like fundamental things that they needed
I would say
to just not be in a really crappy position with their jobs.
But don't beat yourself up, because you got to look at the silver lining, right? There's a lot of great things that happen. Some of the best shows I watch right now, some of the best shows that we produce, Nick, right now, are reality shows.
That
Doesn't
is true.
mean that there's not a place for scripted stuff,
Oh,
because
absolutely
we
not.
know 100% that there is. In fact, I don't think that'll ever be the case where we won't have scripted material. It's just not possible. I mean, it's just not.
Sure.
Right.
No, and I don't mean to insinuate that like it's a completely bad thing just because that happened. I just mean to say that like I wish that that wasn't the case. I wish that
Well,
these shows were not at least partially born out of people screwing other people
Right.
out of, because just
right.
to be frank,
Right.
I fully support IATSE and what they want. I was talking to some friends today, and they shared some anecdotes with me that just kind of made me go, holy shit, are you serious? Of like
Yeah.
things that they themselves have actually been through in the industry, you know,
Yes.
not just working 16-hour days, but working 16-hour days and not being able to have a whole lot of turnaround time. Therefore, people are driving home very tired. People have fallen asleep at the wheel,
Yeah. And not being
which is
compensated for it,
crazy.
which is
Yeah,
the worst.
and not being and being compensated less than they would be compensated on a different production, just because these streaming services are still under the heading of new media,
Right.
and
Well,
that seems to be their loophole right now.
and you guys know what I do, right? So I oversee a TV
Right.
channel. So I have kind of a leg straddling both sides of this issue. The thing that irks me the most is what I heard. Now, I don't know. I'm not in it, right? I'm not part of IATSE. We're not involved in that dispute in any way. But what I heard was that places like, or streaming services like Apple TV is claiming that they can't pay industry rates because they don't have as many subscribers as, say, a Netflix or Disney Plus, which I call bull on, right? Because just because you don't have the subscribers doesn't mean, if you want to provide the content to the people so that you can eventually have the subscribers, you've got to pay a fair price, right? I guarantee you
Right.
that the executives at Apple TV aren't going to say, well, since we don't have enough subscribers, I'm going to take a pay cut of 80%
Right.
until we get enough subscribers to get my rate up, right? It doesn't work that way. So,
It
Yeah,
never works that way. It
right,
never works in that direction. And I
right.
think you're absolutely right. Because my thing is this, it's also insane when you hear them say that they don't have that many Apple Plus subscribers. Because I'm going to tell you something. Everybody goes out and buys these iPhones. There's all these iPhones that are out here and everything there. I'm going to tell you what I got for free with my iPhone
Apple
was
TV
an
subscription.
Apple Plus TV subscription for a year. And the crazy thing was this, I had already been a subscriber for a year prior to that. So I was like, oh, cool, I got a free year. It was, but my thing is, with all these people with iPhones, how are you telling me you only have such a small subscriber count? Do people just not know that they have this to activate this subscription? Or
Well, there
what's
was a
the situation? And either way,
yeah. To your point,
you've
yeah,
got the money.
that's probably the case. Probably people didn't realize
Mhm.
that with an Apple device they got that subscription. Secondly,
Mhm.
when Apple TV Plus started, the shows were not good, right? Their content, they did not have great content, and
Yeah.
they didn't have a lot of it. So when
Well, hold
HBO
on.
Max,
They've got the morning show though, and I'm gonna tell you something. The morning
that's
show
one show.
slaps
It's one
with
show.
Emmys, and now
One
they got
show.
Ted
well,
Lasso. Now they got
and
But
two shows.
they didn't have
And
those Emmys before when it first
yeah,
started. But
that's
yes,
fair. Fair enough. Fair
and,
enough. Fair
and Ted
enough.
Lasso is a
well,
great show and
and to
all that
your
good stuff.
point, and to your point, talking about Emmys, that's another point. As a matter of fact, one of my friends who I was talking to today about this made
Yep.
that very point. When it's like you want to still be called new media, but when you look at the Emmys, which just happened, and you're
Right.
seeing who is winning all these Emmys now, who is predominantly winning
Yeah.
these
Who
Emmys?
cares if you
Where are these
have
shows
the
coming from?
subscriber count?
They're not coming from
Well,
traditional media. They're coming from this quote unquote new media, which
yeah,
is
Right.
ridiculous that it's still new media.
right.
Like,
Well, that's a weird argument though, because then you've got things like the Oscars not letting Netflix movies in to be nominated. Right, there was a year where even Steven Spielberg cried bullcrap.
Really campaigned against it,
Yeah,
hardcore.
right. So you can't
That's
have it
true.
both ways, right? If you're going to let
That's true.
streaming services into the Emmys, you got to let Netflix and streaming services into the Oscars too, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a. I mean, we are in strange times in so many different ways, you know.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it is weird. I just, on a personal note, I just hope that these people get what, in my opinion, at least, I think they deserve. I don't think people deserve to be driving home sleepy and falling asleep at the wheel and not seeing their
Absolutely.
families, and in some cases not being able to have families because their life is the job. Um,
Right.
you know,
Agreed
I
on that.
I kind of feel like, especially in the United States, we've kind of allowed ourselves to slip into this mindset that it's okay for your job to be your life. And, I think all of us can appreciate a concept like working hard and putting your best foot forward. But I think we could also agree that there comes a point where that goes too far. And you have to be able to take a step back and say, you know what? Maybe this is a little too much. Maybe we are expecting a little too much of these people. This is a little unreasonable. I mean, the
It does.
when you go back to the early 20th century, there's a reason why we have, well, a lot of people, not everybody, but there's a reason why a lot of people have a 40-hour work week. There were things going on back then that were just not okay.
Right.
And,
And you're right, but and especially difficult in this industry because the people who are in this industry flip and love what we do. Right, we
yes,
love what we
Exactly.
do. It's not work for us. We go in, we're playing for a living. So we
Mhm.
do go the extra mile sometimes. We do stay the 16-hour day on set or
hmm
turn around within the 8-hour turnaround. You come back in 4 hours or something like that because you love it, because you want to help and you want to. But there comes a point when everyone's got to say, some of the responsible adults have to say, we know you love it and I really appreciate that you love it, but you got to go home. You got to go home. You got to get some rest.
Right.
So,
sure.
um,
And
I'm
at the very least, everybody should be fairly compensated for that additional time that they're giving to
At the
that
very
work and
least.
project.
across
At the very least.
across the board. I mean, that's
Mhm.
I can't even believe that in this day and age we're still having the
We
conversation
have to
about.
say it. Yeah, that
Yeah,
we even have to say it. Right.
absolutely. But if the streaming services are holding people's feet to the fire for quick turnarounds and extra long days on set and not enough rest, not enough food, then there's something wrong there because
Mhm.
I would only assume, and I don't know this firsthand, but I would only assume that they're saying you come back within before the 8 hours are up, or we're going to replace you with somebody else, and that's where the problem lies, right? Where people
Right.
feel obligated to say okay, otherwise they're not going to have a job. So that's where it becomes
Right.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about it is just that, we, just for the average person who might be listening, we don't always think about what goes into the making of some of our favorite movies and TV shows. For us as consumers and as viewers, it's often just a form of escape for us. And I think sometimes we can take it for granted that these things don't just come out of thin air. There's a lot. I mean, it is fun, don't get me wrong. It's a great job, but it is also work. And there's a lot of work that does go into it, and people do pour their hearts and souls into it. Um, so it's just something to think about, just something to consider, that like, just because, they're having a lot of fun, they do still deserve to be compensated and
And,
treated fairly.
and it's
And
hard work. It is a
yeah,
lot of
Very.
work. It's a lot of long
yeah.
hours on your feet. I mean, it's a lot of work out in the elements. People don't realize how much work it actually is.
And
Uh,
and and as a, and just on a personal note, as a fan, I know that I would not necessarily care if I have to wait an extra month or two for a movie to come out, or for a show to debut, or for a trailer to come out. That would not bother me at all if that means that other people are being compensated more fairly and their working conditions are a little bit better.
No, but there's a rub. The longer it takes, the more money it takes. That's the problem. That's the problem. So, well, I think we've explored this topic fairly thoroughly. Is there anything?
It's a heavy topic, but it
It
was
is.
one that at least I felt was important to talk about, because especially I know we all have friends and people that we're very close to who are being affected by it. So
Yeah,
I,
directly affected.
yes.
I think it's safe to say that this show is a fan of IATSE, so the
Yeah,
three of us are supportive of it. Yeah.
Well, on a much
100%.
lighter note, gentlemen, what have you guys been watching this week?
Oh man, I was actually thinking about, because normally we ask this question and I draw a blank because I haven't thought about it throughout the week. Like, hey, this is a new thing I'm getting into or watching, right? But this whole week I've been watching things and be like, oh, I'm gonna remember when Nick says that, what are we watching? This is what I'm watching,
So do you
right?
remember
And I've
something?
watched this. I have two things that I
Sure.
wanted to talk about. Okay,
Okay.
one thing that I watched, because I've started my horror movie watching and everything for the Halloween and fall and everything, and I did watch Candyman.
New
Ah.
one. Yeah.
I Yes, the new Candyman, and or I actually have to pull a will. I have to watch it again. Is what I'll say. I'll have to watch it again because I did one of those things where I started watching a movie where I think maybe I was just really too tired to actually watch that movie for the
Mm-hmm.
pacing that it had.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty slowly paced at the beginning. Is the one thing that I'll say, because what actually happened was I fell asleep on it and took a little nap, woke up and people were dead, right? Like, so.
Well then.
So I can't give it a fair criticism because I don't think I've watched enough to really say that. But everything I saw looked fantastic and really well shot and
So
cool looking.
I
Looking
don't think
cool.
that it really technically qualifies for what you've been watching. It's actually what you've been sleeping
No,
through.
that's what I slept on. But we're gonna follow back to that. We're gonna follow back to that.
That
Now,
is
what I've been watching, that's a fair play. What I've been watching has been Why the Last Man on
Oh,
Hulu.
okay.
Man, that's been
I have not
that's
heard of
been an
this.
interesting ride.
So
Okay,
what is that? Because I'm not familiar.
Because
okay. Well, why the huh? What was that, Will?
did you read the graphic novel?
I did not read the graphic
All
novel.
right.
It was one of
All
those
right.
things that it's kind of been in like the hemisphere. I knew about the graphic novel, but never really dug into it. But yeah, it's a graphic novel, Nick. That's where it came from, an indie novel, if I'm not mistaken. And it's um basically the one thing that I knew going in was that there was one dude was the last guy on the planet, and it
York.
was a bunch of women. York, yeah.
York. That's why.
And
That's why. Why?
why? Yes, exactly. That's his name, and so that's the why. Why the last man? So he's the last man. But the thing is, like, because I didn't read the graphic novel at all, I just really didn't know what I was prepared for. And I don't know if you've seen any of the show or not, Will.
I haven't. I haven't yet, but I plan to.
Yeah, I assume if you read the novel, though, the
I
graphic
did.
novel.
Yeah, and
Okay, so
it's a
you'll
series.
probably hate it.
It's
You'll
a
probably
series of
hate
graphic novels. Well, full disclosure, I've already heard that it steers away from the graphic novels.
it. See, and that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to ask.
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested to know, is because as a show, not knowing anything other than what I told you about a guy who was the last guy on the planet, going in the show, it's pretty cool so far. It's different. I wasn't expecting this. It was crazy because they had like a whole blip moment where they actually show you know what happens to the guys and everything pretty early on there, in that first episode. And that's pretty cool. So I think it's worth looking into. Diane Lane's in it, and I really love Diane Lane. Um I love Martha. Um
Why'd you
she's
say that
really cool.
name?
Let's not retread that.
But yeah, so, and she's in it and she does really well. She plays a congresswoman and then a leader and everything, and it's really, because I don't want to get into spoilers for it if you haven't, but I love, it's shot really well, it looks really cool. Again and again, it's one of these streaming movies, or streaming shows. Actually, it's a streaming show, because I believe it's actually shot for Hulu on FX, which is this weird thing that I'm getting now, that they shoot shows through FX studios that are specifically for Hulu.
Hmm.
So I think that kind of ties into what we were talking about here,
Yeah.
with these streaming
Yeah.
services and kind of working their way around different things. So this isn't even
Mhm.
really, to my recollection, this isn't actually on FX itself proper,
Mm,
but on FX on Hulu.
yes.
And so yeah, but it's a really good, I've enjoyed it so far. I think I've watched 3 of the 4 current episodes that are up there. If you've got Hulu, I've got like the cheapest version of it. I can definitely get this show, but you got some ads.
Right.
That's the only way I see commercials now, by the way, is through
Right.
Hulu. Um,
Yeah.
and they're actually welcoming on Hulu. At points as I never see them. I'm like, oh, a commercial.
The only problem with Hulu commercials is it's the same commercial every break.
That is the one
Annoying.
thing, because there was one time we were watching and there was some girl that popped up and just her tie that was in her attire. I was just like, that's really distracting and I hate it. And then it was like the same commercial every time.
Every
And I
time.
said, well, thanks Hulu.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm watching. Why the Last Man? It's pretty good. I don't want to get too far into it for spoilers, because I went into it pretty cold. So I'd love for everybody to go into it cold and
Yep.
kind of get into it, and of course, we'll have to talk about it again when you do get around to checking it out, because I'd love to hear from somebody who actually read the graphic novel what their take is
Yeah,
on it.
definitely. It is definitely on my list, and I'll let you know once I'm able to catch it.
Cool.
But Nick, what have you been watching?
So I have continued my horror movie watching for this fall season, and I watched something that was not current at all. Uh, rewatched actually for the first
Shocker.
time in years. Say it
Shocking.
again.
Shocker.
Yeah,
Nick wants to
Mr.
watch something vintage?
Chinatown.
What? The Fog? Invasion of the Body Snatchers? What?
I know,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah,
right.
like I know if I'm not watching something from that's like 50 years old, there's something wrong with me. No, but I rewatched for the first time in years another John Carpenter movie, The Thing, his, from
Hmm.
1982.
Oh yeah.
And it's really good. I think I
Brings
liked it
back
more
memories.
the second time I watched it than I did the first time, and I liked it
Really?
quite a bit the first time. It's just a really great. I mean, for anybody who's never seen The Thing, I mean, there is an original from the 50s that this one was based on, but it's just basically about this group of scientists, I guess more or less, who are in Antarctica, and this spaceship just kind of comes and crash lands there, and this thing, as you would, it's in the title of the movie, starts essentially inhabiting the bodies of people and copying them more or less. And what's really interesting about it, what I love about it, is that what really drives the entire movie is the fact that there's this overwhelming sense of like you don't know who you can trust, because you don't always. There's scenes where you see this thing take over a person or a dog in some cases, but then there's other scenes where it has taken somebody over and you don't know it.
Right.
And
Mm.
that's kind of part of what to me is so fun about the movie is there's that constant like I mean, because Kurt Russell, who's the protagonist, you really do feel for the guy because it's like you feel like him, like you don't know, who's been taken over, who hasn't, and the whole movie is just him trying to figure that out, and then slowly but surely, as you can imagine, people kind of one by one get wasted,
Right. And if I remember correctly, that's kind of one of the first movies that did that. Now it's like every movie that comes out or even TV shows, like, well, who is it? One of us is the imposter. So it's not as
definitely been
novel
copied.
anymore. Yeah.
It's
But
definitely a formula that's been copied, but like a lot of those things, often imitated, but rarely imitated very well.
Right. Right.
But if anybody's interested, I don't know where it's streaming because I own it, so I just went to my shelf and pulled the Blu-ray and popped it in.
I actually think it's on HBO Max.
You know what? I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
so.
Yeah. So if you have HBO Max and you've never seen it, and that sounds like your cup of tea, I highly recommend it. John Carpenter, great horror filmmaker. Also, one thing I totally glossed over is the movie's also really well known for its practical effects. Some of the best practical effects, I think, were done by Rick Baker, but don't quote me on that.
And
But
And the original
Uh,
score
oh well, yeah, and the original score by Carpenter, right?
by
Or
John
no, I'm
Carpenter.
sorry, and no,
Absolutely.
Ennio Morricone.
Oh, really? I thought it was John who did it. No.
Well, he might have done some, but I do remember in the opening credits, Ennio Morricone's name came up, which is
Got it.
also really cool because that's like, if you're into Quentin Tarantino movies, that's basically like his favorite composer of all time. Like he's used him before, and he's jacked songs from Morricone movies to put in his movies. So if you're into Quentin Tarantino movies, that's another reason you might want to check it out. But the score is great. The practical effects, though, that's something that I greatly miss in a lot of modern movies, especially a lot
Yeah.
of modern horror films. I miss the practical effects. I miss the things that were done for real, either with animatronics or whatever, that now overwhelmingly is just done with CGI.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just not my thing.
And I think that's
Mm.
ironic that we're going to be talking about reminiscence later today, and I think we're going to be talking about something. There's some things in there that we'll
You
talk
mean
about.
Malignant?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Time Warp
Malignant.
back to last week.
Right.
Malignant.
I was like,
Yeah.
did
Well,
we
yeah,
go?
and
Are
that's
we in a reminiscence? Are we in the memory? Or like I?
Will, if
Yeah.
this, if please stop telling me the story in the middle so it can be happy. Whatever you do, whatever
We're
story you're going to tell me, stop it in the middle so it can be
we're
happy.
gonna start in the beginning. We're gonna end it in the middle. So, but
Yeah.
No, but that's
when we talk about Malignant, we'll talk about that because there's some things that I want to say about that as we
that's
get
an
later on.
excellent point. And yeah, you're right. There are some parallels between the two, and yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Well, I actually have been doing a rewatch of Loki.
Oh, the
Have you,
show.
have you guys seen it?
I have
Yeah,
not.
I've
I'll be
seen.
honest. I'm very marveled out right now
No.
after Endgame. I thought Endgame was great. I thought
Yeah.
Infinity War was great, but
So
I haven't
Nick,
kept up with the shows.
do yourself a
Nick,
favor.
need a power nap.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor and pick up Loki. You don't have to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier or where was it, WandaVision,
Mhm.
but definitely, I think you would probably enjoy Loki because it is so different than anything else that Marvel has done before.
Okay.
So I won't spoil it, but in a nutshell, it picks up right after the events of Endgame, where Loki gets the Tesseract kicked over to him at the end of the Battle of New York when the Avengers go back in time, and he's able to pick up the Tesseract and teleport himself away. It picks up right after, like literally right after that, and then it goes off into wild and unpredictable areas. And it's only 6 episodes, so it's a quick stream, but I thought it was really probably, I would say without hesitation, it's probably the best Marvel television show to date, in my opinion.
Wow.
Uh-oh,
I
here
mean,
comes
Well,
Tom.
I've heard a lot of great things about all of them. So, and
Here
that's part
comes
of what's
Tom.
been intimidating about watching them is because I heard people say great things about WandaVision. I heard people say great things about Falcon Winter Soldier. I'm hearing people say great things about this, and I'm just like, I get overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's so
Yeah.
much. Like,
I think if you're going to watch one, this has to be the one because it's very similar to what happened at the end of Civil War, or
I'm
not
looking
Civil
at
War,
Tom's
Winter
face.
Soldier. The big reveal from Winter Soldier that it changed the Marvel universe after that movie. This Marvel movie now has been changed because of this TV show. So
I
you
see.
to move forward, you got to watch it.
all right, Nick. So here's my take on Loki. Loki is basically a white collar, um, but
Like the
Marvel. It's
like
like
like the show
it's
White Collar.
yeah, like the show White Collar. It's basically White Collar. It's like White Collar and Doctor Who had a baby, and that's
Okay.
what you got there. But here's the thing. Um, I obviously, as you suggest, myself and Will have different takes on this all the way around. I actually watched WandaVision and I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier and I watched Loki until they were sitting on the train talking about love, and then I was like, all right, I'm out, guys, I'm out.
Oh, you
Right?
missed the best
But
part.
I hold on. But I came back for the last episode, and that's what I'll say, Nick, is this: the last episode's the one you really need. You know what I mean? Like in order for the thing, the last episode's the one you need. I'm sure there's other stuff in between, but my thing is this: if it's not your thing, if it becomes not your thing, right? And you'll probably know about 3 to 4 episodes in. Yeah, I mean, well, 2 to 3 episodes in, if it's not your thing, I'll say that. But if it's not your thing, the last episode is kind of like that piece you need for the overall arching MCU. Okay, like if that's the case, like but there's apparently a really good show in there that people really enjoyed. I just didn't. I just like I said, I got a couple of episodes in, and it pulled me so far off the Marvel train. I haven't even watched What If. So,
Wow. So
but
let me ask you.
I'll,
Let me ask you a question.
I'll,
Did you
go
watch?
ahead.
Have you watched Time Bandits?
No,
Okay,
no, I didn't watch Time Bandits.
that explains a lot, because if you watched and loved Time Bandits, you will like Loki, because it's got a very similar feel to it in a lot of ways. But what you missed is the most joyful episode, where it's every variant of Loki known, imaginable, fighting each other. That was glorious purpose right there.
I did hear about that. Cool. So let me tell you what I loved, though, Nick. I loved the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and here's why. Okay, here's why. Out of the 3 Marvel shows, I think there's like the interesting thing about it is there are people who will defend like all 3 of them to the end, and then there's people like me who kind of like really likes pretty much all of them except maybe one they just don't connect with the same way, but it gets my respect. Like I just like Loki gets my respect. Obviously people love it. It's just not my cup of tea. It's kind of like me and Lord of the Rings. It's just not my thing. Okay. But I get it. I get it. No. I that's my thing. It's not my thing. I know
fair.
everybody loves it. It's kind of like, I just
dude, I can
respect.
look, I can take or leave Lord of the Rings, so I'm kind of with
Right.
you. I can take it or leave
So you see what I'm talking about.
But here's hang on. I don't discount it altogether. I get it.
No, I
get
respect
it. But there
it.
is a part of me. There is a part of me that also sympathize. If anybody's ever seen Clerks 2, there's a part of me that sympathizes with the scene in Clerks 2 where Randall just is like,
don't do that.
Those movies are just those are 3 movies of people walking. That's what they are. They're 3 movies of people walking to pitch a ring in a volcano. There is a part of me
saying that, Nick, is kind of like going, all right, I'm not racist, but you know what I'm saying? Let me go ahead and
I would like to point out way less bad.
Way less bad. It's like, hey, Lord of the Ring people, let me just point out that I really, really respect you guys. I really respect your franchise, yada, yada, yada. But really, that movie was just a bunch of people walking. Come on, guys.
Right.
Come on. But I respect it a little bit.
There's a part of me that sympathizes with that. A small part.
I respect it a little bit more than that. I think the Lord of the Rings did some amazing. Peter Jackson pulled off some amazing feats.
I
agree.
That franchise.
I agree.
Tom.
And Return of the King, I think, paved the way for other movies. I think Lord of the Rings paved the way for other movies that aren't just like straight up dramas or movies about Hollywood or Holocaust movies to actually be considered like Best Picture worthy. So totally,
it did a great thing.
I appreciate that.
Being said, that's kind of my whole take on those first slate of like Marvel shows and everything there, or at least, well, that's my take on Loki. But I preferred out of the 3, I preferred Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Why? Because in a way, it was exactly the amount of flavor from Marvel that I wanted, but then it also was my favorite stuff. Like my favorite Marvel film, other than, like a standalone film, was Captain and the Winter Soldier. Like that's my favorite one, right? So this year I got to play in that world a little bit more, where you get, political intrigue and all this stuff, and and all of that's there. My things, but that's my thing. Right. Like I like that stuff. So it just really. Go ahead, Will.
I liked it too. Winter Soldier is one of my favorite Marvel movies because I like that whole spy genre. But when it comes to my superheroes, I like people to have, like, we're gonna throw down in a second, because I'm gonna say the worst hero in DC is Batman because he has no powers,
Oh,
right?
for God.
For,
All
for
right.
me, for me, Batman is boring. Like I don't read
You say
Batman
this?
books because
You know what?
he has no
Wow.
power.
You know what? The Lord of the Rings is just 3 movies of people
Wow.
walk into a volcano.
Wow. I
Hit the
take back
ring.
everything I said about the
I,
Lord of the Rings.
so I
They're
said that
nothing but little hey,
I say
hey,
that
these
specifically
little
to get the
cockroach
reaction that I
people,
got from you.
these troll people that you guys like, I don't know with the feet.
No, but you're right. The best thing about Marvel is that each property is totally different from the other. So you'll like ones more than others. That's
Yeah.
well,
And that's exactly where I was headed with this. Like with all of those first three, like I said, certain people like personally, I enjoyed a little bit of all three of them. Like even Loki, there were things I really enjoyed. I loved the ending for it and everything there. I enjoyed all that and what it was setting up. WandaVision, like I said, I thought it was fantastic until literally the end, and then it was such a sloppy ending. It just kind of like just did not nail that landing. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier for me, I enjoyed from beginning to end, getting kind of what I expected, but also some things I didn't expect. It was a really deep.
it was deep and
Um,
dark too.
it was yeah, it was a deep and dark show. A lot of that I didn't expect it to go to. It's kind of I mean, everybody gets every surprise every once in a while when you kind of hit on any social issues or you go to any kind of like dark place and you've got the mouse ears on you. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And everybody kind of gets shocked there. But like I said, I thought Falcon and the Winter Soldier was really good. I remember waking up each Friday morning being really excited to watch that. you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
whereas my daughter loves WandaVision,
right.
has
Yeah.
rewatched it like 8 times.
Well,
Yeah.
and I was
My
going to say,
daughter did not
piggybacking.
like Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, no, mine
She didn't
didn't
like it.
either.
No.
she didn't
I
either.
was just gonna say, piggybacking off of of what you said about if it's not your thing. It's funny because Will liked Loki, you liked Captain the Winter Soldier, and it's funny because of those shows, even though I didn't watch them, the one that I considered watching the most was actually WandaVision because of the just how they. I saw they would go back and do like the sort of I Love Lucy thing. They kind of did
Sitcom.
like a
Yeah.
almost yeah, they kind of did showed like different eras of TV and pop culture. And
Mhm.
I'm a pop culture whore and I love that kind of stuff. So
You'll probably like it, Mr.
Yeah,
Turner Classic Movies.
yeah,
You'll love
absolutely.
it.
yeah.
I think you
I
should
like seeing
check it out.
when people like do stuff like that, but kind of in a modern way when they kind of call back to that stuff. It's kind of cool because I still
Well,
think there's
hmm
stuff from that time that is worth like doing and looking
yeah.
at. And I think there's still techniques that they used back then that are still valid. So
Well, the interesting thing
Yeah, no, I agree.
about that show is that they didn't do it in a modern way. They did it the old way. They did it
well,
exactly
I
the
The
old
mean
old way,
way.
that's
right?
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
what I
that's
mean
how
is they
you got
did it the
that
old
look,
way, but
especially the
in a
Bewitched
modern time.
stuff
Like
at
they
the
were doing
beginning.
it the old way, which and that's another
Modern
cool thing
times.
too, because that's something that I wish I saw more. Like whenever you see a movie and somebody is like showing you and it's funny because this can kind of dovetail into Malignant a little bit. Whenever there's a part where it's supposed to take place in the past and it's supposed to look as if maybe it was shot on like a camcorder from the 80s or 90s, it almost never looks like that
Right.
because people just shoot
hmm
it with modern gear and put a filter over it. I've always been like, why don't people go to eBay, go to Goodwill, actually buy an old camcorder, do it for real,
Yeah.
and then digitize it? Like to me, that would be so much cooler. But
And actually,
that's just my opinion.
you're absolutely right. And that was one of the things that I loved about WandaVision, especially at the beginning, was that they would shoot everything just like they shot it, for Dick Van Dyke or for Bewitch and everything. But when they would do those moments where they're letting you know something's not right, then they're shooting it with modern camera angles.
Yeah.
Then you get a Dutch
Right.
angle that
Right.
looks like it walked right out of a Brian De Palma film.
Right.
Then you get like these slow, like creepy dolly shots and everything towards everybody, and then boom, we pop right back to Mary Tyler Moore,
Right.
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever. And it was pretty cool, and it was cool how they would do that with that technique. But like you said, that's almost perfect to try to segue into
Malignant.
Malignant.
Mm.
Man, I got to tell you guys, out of every movie that we've seen over these last couple of weeks, I want to talk about. There's none that I wanted to talk about as much as Malignant. Literally, the moment it ended, I said,
Right.
I was nothing if not entertained.
Right. There is a
last
lot to
week?
talk about. But before we get into it, should we set the table and just kind of give a synopsis of what it
So
is?
we're,
Yeah,
well,
let's do that.
first,
Who don't know?
let's let everybody know we're gonna first try as hard as we can not to give any spoilers, but it's hard to talk about this movie without actually giving
Sure.
things away. So
Guys,
we're gonna try to do this non-spoiler section, and then we'll warn you before we get into the spoilers because
It's probably going to be another short spoiler-free section.
yeah,
Really short,
it's going to be
really
short,
short.
guys.
Yeah. All right. So Nick, do you have the synopsis?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can kind of give. I think I can give a decent overview. So,
okay, just be
for
careful.
those who don't know, like Tom was actually the one who I had heard about this movie, but Tom kind of introduced it to us.
Hold on. I've got the synopsis. I got the synopsis.
Let's go with the official.
Because you probably have a safe one.
The official. Yeah, this one's safe. Paralyzed by fear from shocking visions, a woman's torment worsens as she discovers her waking dreams are terrifying realities.
And that's a very neat little what when I was in film school, it's what in film school they call it a log line. It's a very neat little log line that
very neat.
And what we should say is, honestly,
this is absolutely nothing.
Well, no, but to me, I agreed with Tom when Tom told me about it. Go into this as cold as possible.
Yep.
Right.
I do think that is probably the best way to enjoy this movie, and I think it's probably the most you'll probably get the most accurate sense of how you feel about it if you go into it cold. Because the thing that people are buzzing about that I don't think this is at all a spoiler because people have been buzzing about it a lot. The third act is kind of fucking wild. Can we agree on that?
And Tom warned us last week. He said, you're not prepared.
You're not prepared.
And you're right. You're right. So the beauty of this movie is that when it first starts, you think it's one thing. Halfway through, you think it's something totally different. By the time it ends, you're like, what the fuck? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to let that one slip. Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's the most accurate depiction of real feelings on how it was like each act, like those were the acts.
Yeah.
I know what this is going to be.
Yep.
Okay. So this is what it really is. Yeah. What the fuck is this?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? What is this?
Yeah. Well, let's set the table. What do you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the movie or no?
Well, I'll have to say this. Okay. I put it in my enjoyment category, my personal enjoyment category. Okay. This is one of those movies that by the time it's over, you're going to have a lot of strong feelings on it. You'll probably have to be like me and have to think about it for a couple of days to really get a final feeling on the whole thing because it's going to be polarizing. I think people are either going to love or hate this thing,
probably,
or it's. Or it might even fall into the realm where it really is for me, where I just respect the balls. I just respect the balls to just go and do this. There's the fact that James Wan took this movie in the direction that he took it. I can't think of many other directors producing at that level that will just go that balls to the walls with something other than like say M. Night Shyamalan, because nobody's giving him their money anymore. He's playing with his own. So he'll do what he wants.
Well, I mean,
right?
I'd argue there's other people like, Quentin Tarantino in a different way who will do.
Yeah, but that's different. That's different because
there are things though that like I would argue, and I'll make that argument a little later in the spoiler version, but there are things I would argue that to me are just as impactful and just as crazy, if not more so, in other movies that I've seen, even though this was crazy. I admit this was it was crazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying is for the studio, for this to be a studio film that came out, okay, that's the part that's surprising me. If this had been like James Bond, like with his own money, like produced this thing and we came out, okay, cool. But no, Warner Brothers was pushing this at like CinemaCon and everything just like a few weeks ago, and it was like this is their thing, but it's just so insane and something that I really could never. I honestly can't believe this script made it through. To be quite honest,
Well, I think probably the reason why is because of the success that Aquaman had, right? When
that's
James Wan did
exactly.
Aquaman, right?
Yeah.
So they said, okay,
Yeah.
well, so let's just give him the money. Let's he knows what he's doing. Let him do whatever he wants to do. And he did say he was going back to his horror roots, but he's doing something totally different.
And he did.
Oh yeah. Oh boy, did he do something totally different. Absolutely. Yeah. So Nick, did you like the movie?
Yeah, here's the funny thing. Like Tom said, it's probably gonna be really polarizing and people are either gonna love it or hate it. I actually neither loved it nor hated it, to be perfectly honest with you. I liked it. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I'll say that. But like
Right.
Tom, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I respect the balls.
Yeah.
I respect the balls. I can't say that for my personal taste, everything that was done worked for me, even though
Mhm.
I get why it was done and I completely can understand the mindset behind doing it. My personal taste, it didn't all necessarily work for me, but I do respect the balls. And here's the other comparison I'll make. The movie that we talked about last time, Reminiscence, there were things in that movie that I felt just didn't work, period. Not just for my
Mhm.
taste, but just didn't work. Like I felt
Didn't
like there were
work.
things in that movie they did, in my opinion, they did not accomplish what they sought out to accomplish with that movie. Malignant, I think it's inarguable that it accomplishes what it sets out to accomplish. The question is, do you appreciate what it set out to accomplish? I think that's
Bingo.
the real question. And I can totally understand if some people don't appreciate it,
Yep. Yep.
but I do think that the movie absolutely accomplished what it set out to accomplish. So I would give it a like. I like it. And I would have to say, like, if people are fans of horror, if you're fans of any subgenres of horror, I think you'll probably at least want to give it a watch. You know, I think you will.
At least to be in on the conversation.
If for no other reason to be on the conversation, like I couldn't in all good conscience recommend Reminiscence, but I think I can recommend this. Like,
especially with Halloween around the corner. Like,
yeah. I mean,
why not?
It's not a bad movie. I'll say that definitively. I don't think it's a bad movie at all.
No.
So,
let's hear it.
What did you think?
I'll tell you this. This is a hard one to express my feelings without spoiling anything. I will say this. Back when I was a younger man, I loved horror movies. I loved going to the theater. Halloween came out and Friday the 13th. I watched all those 3D movies. I watched it in the theater with 3D. Like I was all about it. I even watched Nightmare on Elm Street and then was so scared that my best friend and I actually ended up staying up all night long because we could not go to sleep because that's when Friday would get you, right? So I was into it big time. Then I became the protector of the family.
Right.
And now I hate horror movies. I would not have watched Malignant had I not been on the show. It would not have been, it was not an option. Nope.
Yeah.
Like all those paranormal, what is that movie?
Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity movies. I won't touch them with a 10-foot flipping pole just because of one scene that I saw, and that's that baby monitor. No.
Nope. You don't need that stress.
Don't need it.
Well, I can tell you, you're not missing anything with the sequels. I enjoyed the first one, but I think the sequels were all crap.
So I have kept, and I also talk about James Wan. Didn't really enjoy a lot of the aspects of Saw and things like that because the
first Saw or the other Saws.
The first, right?
Okay.
Okay. I didn't watch any of this. I watched the first Saw, but then I didn't watch any of them because, like, the gore, that stuff doesn't attract me anymore. Like back in the day, Jason, and then Halloween, and all that kind of stuff. Friday the 13th. That was like the anticipation. That was the thing. It wasn't the blood gushing out of the person's neck or that gore doesn't attract me because it's gore. There has to be something behind it. So this movie, for approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes, I could not understand why anyone was liking this film. And I'll get into detail as to why in spoilers, right? Because I was going, I've seen this in a blockbuster film that I rented back 20 years ago. This looks exactly like a blockbuster film from 20 years ago, right?
Yes.
The cut, the lighting, the acting, everything was like, what the heck? How, to your point, Tom, who gave this man the money to make this movie that was made 30 years ago, right? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And then the third act happened, and I lost my mind. I lost my ever-loving mind. And because it was the last thing that I could possibly have expected, and we'll talk about it in spoilers, but when that camera turns around and reveals, I was like, what in the living hell, right? But there was a lot of movie after that. And then for them to take it to where they did after that reveal was like, my God, that is something. That is something.
That is something.
You're not wrong.
And I will say, when the movie ended, and my wife, she would not ever watch this, but she just happened to catch the last part of it, and she said, "Well, did you end up liking it?" And I said, "No, what? That last act changed everything.
Everything.
It changed everything. All of a sudden, I became intrigued. I was interested. I was curious, and I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The only problem is that it took me an hour and 20 minutes to get to the enjoyment part.
Right.
And that's exactly where I'm like, I have no idea, because I know there's nobody that sat there and actually read this script and actually made it to the third act and was like, and said, because they don't read that far.
Yeah.
So the idea, they just gave James Wan this money because of Aquaman. They were like, thanks for Aquaman. Here's the check.
Either that, or he only gave them the third act of the script and said, this is like,
that's possible. Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm selling this movie on. Trust me on how I get there. But this is what, that would be my guess. Either that, or yes, they just gave him carte blanche because, that happens. Like sometimes if you make and I'll try to be as diplomatic as possible about how I say this, but like, if you make a much more mainstream film that appeals to a lot more people and it's very successful, oftentimes studios will allow you to then do really whatever you want on your next one. Like it's something that I remember I was listening to Kevin Smith on a podcast once, and he's really good friends with Ben Affleck, for those who don't know. And he was saying back in the day, like he was just saying back in the day, he was having a conversation. He was having a conversation with him, and Ben Affleck would talk about like how, sometimes he would do a movie that was like really crappy, and then sometimes he'd do a good one. And he's like, I do one for me and I do one for them. So it's that's kind of how it goes in Hollywood a lot of the time. But I wouldn't be shocked if whoever he talked to at Warner Brothers just gave them that third act and said, just read this. Don't worry about how I get there. Just read this part. And
that is
plus, I gotta say,
damn good point.
If you look at Malignant and where it is it does not look like, you don't have a whole lot of you don't have big name stars in this and everything there. So this movie, even set wise and everything there, it was pretty simple. It feels like he went kind of back to his Saw roots in a lot of ways, in the production design, of parts of this. And so I think it's a much obviously it's a much smaller film than flipping Aquaman and everything there. So I have no doubt that.
So you could see parts of Aquaman in this movie.
In this film, yes. Totally I can't wait to get into spoiler talk. I got a lot to say about the way they shot this film.
Let's just button this up. Let's put a button on this real quick so we can get to the spoilers, because there's so much we need to talk about. What is your overall? Can you recommend it? Do you not recommend it? What's your overall feeling about it?
I would say if you can be patient and just sit through that first two acts, it is worth sitting through. I would say yes. I would recommend sitting through it if you can be patient for it. And really, if you can just enjoy, because if I was a different man, I could have just sat back and gone, man, I like the nostalgia aspect of this. And I would have enjoyed the first two acts of it. Had I been less of a dick. But because I'm not. And actually, if I didn't hate horror movies so much, I probably would go back and watch it again with that thought in mind, because there are certain things, and we'll probably talk about it in the spoilers, that I want to go back and see, did they really go there in the beginning, and I didn't notice as much as I should have. So
Right.
but yeah, I would say yes.
Cool. All right. Spoiler time. If you haven't
Right.
seen it and you want to
Yes.
see it, stop right now. Go watch it.
Yeah,
Everybody
please
else-
do not let Malignant get spoiled for you.
Yeah, no, I was lucky. I watched it over the weekend, and it had already been out for a little bit at that point, and luckily
Yeah.
I did not. All I
And I
knew,
would-
like we've
I
said,
would
is that the third act is wild, but I didn't know. I didn't know the deal.
And I would say, probably, if this movie's spoiled for you, it's probably not going to be as enjoyable to you.
Yeah,
I would say.
absolutely.
Right. And so
Absolutely.
that in and of itself is part of why I say I liked it and didn't love it, because to your point about how up until you get to the twist, which honestly for me wasn't that big of a twist, I'll be honest with you. I didn't call it.
Mm-mm.
No, hang on. I didn't call it, but there were things that I picked up on throughout the movie where I kind of was in the ballpark by the time that they did the reveal. So to me, it wasn't as crazy. What was crazy to me was what they did after that, everything that happened after the fact. But to your
Balls to
point,
the
though,
wall.
because there's so much, because the first couple of acts are so kind of, let's just be honest, blah. Like, there's really nothing that interesting, in my opinion, about the first couple of acts. It really is kind of a one-act movie. I do feel like it would have been nice if there had been a little bit more in those couple of acts. Like, I feel like you could have still done a little bit more to make it a little more interesting and still had the craziness at the end be crazy and be like, holy shit. Because it is a little, I'll be honest, if I didn't have this show, I don't know if I would have watched this movie either, really.
Yeah. But let's get into spoilers for a second, because we are in spoilers now.
Yes.
Because I'm not sure if I agree with you on that. Just because God, how can I say this?
Well, let's say this first.
I thought.
So let's just give the spoiler so that we can add a little context to how we feel about the spoiler. So the movie is, like you said, it's this woman who's having these visions. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to spoil it, like how to say what the twist is.
So here's the thing.
She got an evil Siamese twin, y'all.
She had an evil Siamese twin.
He's in the back of her head.
I mean, thank you, Tom.
He controls her body. It's insane.
Yeah, so like that, I mean, that's it. Like, she's having these visions and stuff like that. You do see in the beginning of the movie, they flash back, like we talked about, to like this, I don't know, some nondescript, crazy medical facility somewhere. And like they're talking about like cutting out the cancer and stuff like that, hence the title Malignant. And like, so you kind of see this weird I flashed back to, there's a movie that some people might be aware of from the 80s called Basket Case. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not, but it's like this little horror movie that came out in the 80s where kind of a similar thing. This guy, his twin brother, who is like this evil growth, like lives in a basket and like, it's kind of a horror comedy, but that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this movie. I was like, I bet James Wan has seen Basket Case and loves it, because
Probably
the brother, the little demonic evil Siamese brother, reminded me a lot of the dude in Basket Case. But yeah, that's the spoiler. The spoiler is she's having all these visions, and she's this woman who, you know, she grows up. They lead you to believe that she has an imaginary friend. That's kind of the thing that they string you along, wanting you to buy into, is like this thing, whatever it is that's killing people, because she's having visions of people being killed by this weird looking thing that has, it almost reminds you of the girl from The Ring, the way it moves and the long hair, and it's really weird and creepy. And she's having these visions, and they lead you to believe through flashbacks that she had this imaginary friend, and maybe this imaginary friend is killing people. The twist, though, is that he is a growth. He's her Siamese twin who was attached to her at birth, and they tried to get rid of him and only got rid of some of him, and then pushed him into her skull. And then in the beginning of the movie, she's
close it up.
Yeah, and sewed it up. And then in the beginning of the movie, she's having a fight with her boyfriend or husband or whoever, and he pushes her against the wall and she slams her head. And that is like the inciting incident that sets this whole thing in motion. like it lets him out,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the spoiler. That's just kind of so that just to set the table for what our feelings about this. But that's what it is. She has an evil Siamese twin, and homie goes all
Look.
Matrix at the end and starts like shooting people and stuff.
It became a superhero movie in a way at the end. The last
It was.
act.
That's exactly how I felt. That's exactly how I felt about this. This felt like a graphic. Like by the time we got to the third act, this felt like a graphic novel for a comic book villain.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like where now, if I went back and if I go back and watch it now, knowing where I'm going to end up, that's more the feeling I get for this thing.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Than a horror film,
right?
Which it does start off that way.
I was going to say, let's just circle back to what Will was saying before I kind of got us off on that tangent of explaining the spoiler. Cause I was saying that like the first couple of acts, I was kind of hoping there'd be a little bit more to be interesting about it. And Will was saying he disagreed. So I just wanted to kind of set the table and say how crazy the spoiler is. And now we can talk about like why I felt there wasn't enough in the beginning.
So I don't know how much better it could have been, because it's like he was trying to stretch it out as much as he could in a way. The very first thing that happened, I will tell you, one of the scariest things for me in Poltergeist, remember Poltergeist back in the day?
Yes.
Was not the clown, although the clown was scary as hell, and the tree coming in, trying to eat the kid, all that stuff was scary. But the scariest thing to me was when the mom was in the kitchen, bright daylight, and she pushes the dining room chairs into the table and turns around to wash the dishes and turns back around, and the chairs are stacked up in front of her, right on top of the table behind her.
Right.
The fact that someone went behind her and did that without her realizing it scared the living shit out of me. Okay.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, when the thing turns on the blender and the boyfriend goes in the back, or the husband, whatever, goes in the back and says, "What the hell?" And then as he's watching looking at blender, turns it off, the refrigerator door swings open on its own. And he's like, "What the hell is that?" And then he goes into the living room, and because of the someone's watching TV and changing the channels, and he flips out and turns on the lights, and the person that was watching is gone. There's a disconnect, right? Because then that to me was like, okay, we're talking. This is a spirit. This movie's about some evil spirit that's gonna. Okay, so that freaked me out, right? But then the second act, it became all of a sudden this spirit that can go from the kitchen to the living room and disappear from at the flip of a switch. Now has to run away from a cop.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not, and it's not even a spirit. It's her, like that.
I get that, but the first act of the movie, it led you to believe that it was something that was disembodied, that was doing things that freaks people out before it killed the boyfriend.
Right.
But then suddenly in the second act, now the thing is running away from the cop, and the cop is shooting at it, and it's going down over the fire escapes, right? Yes. Bang, bang, falling. A disembodied being wouldn't have to do that. So now suddenly became a killer. Right now it's a killer movie, right?
Sure. And that's, well, and and to your point, talking about Poltergeist, like, to me, I guess that's where, so you're saying that like the stuff they did in the first act, like that stuff, the refrigerator opening and like seeing the person that wasn't there, like that kept you engaged, and like that worked for you, and you were scared. Like, is that what you're saying?
When I first watched that, I thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to finish this movie.
Gotcha. So for me, like, I guess what I'm saying, and having the first couple acts be a little bit more interesting, is like in Poltergeist, to your point, it's like these spirits doing this stuff, and it is actually spirits because it is Poltergeist and it is like the supernatural and stuff. In this movie, because it starts as one thing and then it's another thing, that was for me what was a little hard to be like. It was harder for me to get invested because it kept changing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And also because, now hang on. It was, in one sense, it was harder for me. I stayed invested because I knew that the third act was supposedly worth it. I stayed invested for that reason, because I'm like, okay, I know that this is all going to culminate in something wild that I want to see. But because it was like one thing, then the next thing, then it was something totally different. And like the fire escape thing, which to me was like kind of James Wan's ode to Seven. It reminded me of Seven a lot in that scene where he chases John Doe when Brad Pitt's chasing him through the streets and stuff. It felt that way, you know?
But there's where I started seeing the Aquaman parallels in that scene. the way it
I'll
was
tell you
shot.
where I saw the Aquaman parallels was in all the camera choices that were
Yes.
made in this film. Let me tell you
The
something.
effects, the visual
This
effects, the
this
transitions.
this movie, if you tell me that you didn't enjoy like the fact that they gave you some cool, awesome ass like camera movement, camera this, just there's a cool shot in this film, like in every scene, that it's like all style. Okay, and I guess that's why I really enjoyed
Right.
it. From my take, is that I'm a really good friend of mine once told me, you're a more is more kind of person, you know. And
That was
um
me. I'll admit. You don't have to you don't have to be coy about it. I said
yeah,
that.
I said a really good
But
friend.
I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it
Specify.
as like,
I didn't want to specify. I don't think didn't take it in a bad
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
I thought it was
Yeah.
an accurate depiction of how I like things. I love the style. I love
Right.
James Wan leaning into his style. And the thing I loved about it was, for this film, I felt like I got to see very different, because it was all over the place in a way. Like with the story, I got to see James Wan in every stage of his career. Okay,
Fair point.
throughout this movie.
Yep.
And everything. It's like a culmination of, hey, I made $1 billion with Aquaman. They gave me money to do whatever I want. Here's everything I've learned in this time,
Right.
and we're gonna make
Yeah.
something freaking insane.
And
Okay, just insane.
through that lens, I totally agree with you. I totally
Right.
agree. Like, in
And so,
retrospect, looking at it that way, I agree. I was just giving you like my first impressions while I was watching it. That was kind of what I was
right, of
thinking and
course,
feeling
of
as I
course.
was going through it.
Of course. And I think, and that's why I say it's one of those movies where it's almost kind of hard to recommend it to people, because I already know there's a lot of people who aren't going to make it through that beginning.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a lot of people who, like, okay, here's the thing. My wife hates horror films, hates them, doesn't like watching them, gets mad at me for watching them. We even have like this rule that, like,
Sounds familiar.
just between like, yeah, just for like October, we watch all the horror films in October, and then that's it. Like, because from that on, we don't watch any other.
Tom, it's September.
What's that? I know.
There's not
I
enough time
kind
in
of
September.
convinced
There's
her.
not enough time in
I
October.
convinced her on this one for the podcast. I was like, "Look, it's for the podcast. I got to do the thing." And so she made the same bad decision that Karen made with trying to watch Suicide Squad.
Right.
So anyway, but she actually watched this entire movie with me. And I think she was kind of like Will at the beginning, like the ghosty, like kind of demon kind of stuff kind of freaked her out, which again, I actually didn't find as disjointing as I think you guys did with later on, when it became it was an actual killer. Because with me, while I was seeing it like it was playing out like a ghost, the way it was kind of like, again, since we come back now and we're looking at this as kind of like a graphic novel for like a supervillain and everything there. That first time that you show Batman and like two people, he's probably doing some stuff that looks really supernatural, but he's not, because as Will pointed out, he's just a regular guy in the suit.
Right.
Anyway, but that first time that you're introduced to him, he
Right.
does some supernatural looking stuff.
Right.
This
Fair point.
Gabriel is what James Wan was trying to do here was create a movie character with
Mhm.
Gabriel, and he said, "Hey, Gabriel can do some weird stuff," and then throughout the movie, Gabriel continued to do weird things and that were almost supernatural. So it didn't really take me out of it, that part at the beginning. But I will say it was disjointing because it felt more demonic, more ghostly
Mhm.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then as it transitioned through, I was like, okay, no, this person's just apparently very capable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I went from,
That's a way.
this is a
to put
demonic
it.
movie
He's very capable.
to okay, this is a killer, to okay, she did it, so she's schizophrenic, to
Yep.
oh my god, what the hell is this? Right?
What the hell is this?
Was a Will.
Right. And that's kind of the thought process I had too, because when you do get to that second act where the cop is actually chasing Gabriel, that was when I had another sort of mind shift about, okay, so because
Mhm.
a big thing with me is a big kind of belief I have about filmmaking in general is like you can do whatever you want. You set the rules, but then you have to
Mm-hmm.
play by them. Like
Mm-hmm.
as the person who creates like the world, right? You set the rules for your
Mm-hmm.
world, but then at least in my opinion, and it's all it is, my opinion, but I think if you set the rules, then you need to play by them. So as I'm watching it, I'm trying to figure out what the rules of this universe are.
I agree on
Because
that.
Yep.
because in the first, like you said, to your point, in the first act, because it seems more supernatural, that my mind was going a little bit more towards, is this actually a demon? Is this actually a ghost? What is this? But then when you get to that second act, because up until that point, the only person who has seen Gabriel really is the main character.
Mm-hmm.
Madison, is that her name, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe so.
Emily May.
So something like that. So she's the only one. The only time we ever see him really is in her flashbacks. I mean, we do see her husband see the thing that goes away, but I feel like that's kind of open to interpretation. When you really see him do stuff, it's only with her. But when you see the cop chasing him, that's when I was like, okay, so this person exists. This is
Right.
actually a person.
Right.
And
Yes,
that's
exactly
just
right.
my process because I'm trying to figure out the rules of the movie, right? So
Right.
that
Right.
was when I kind of figured out the twist, but not really. I was in when I said was I was in the ballpark because I was
Well,
thinking at that point, oh, it's her. She's doing
well,
all of it.
well.
Not
See,
just
I had
her.
already
Right.
figured out
Which was
before
half
that point.
correct. I just didn't know
Well,
the part about homeboy living in her face and coming out the back of her head.
Right.
well, but here's the thing. They had already shown you prior to that point of him chasing him and everything there that Gabriel was obviously human. The only scene where Gabriel is supernatural like is in that first
That first scene.
introduction.
Right.
Okay,
You're right.
because every single other time we saw him have to go collect his murder weapon of
Right,
choice,
right.
because he didn't have one for the first kill. He
That's
had
true.
it for all the other ones.
That's true.
And you see when everything there, we see him go and find people. Like he was very much obviously a person after that introduction. So that's kind of why I could let a lot of the introduction part, like I said, like again, I think it's like that first really supernatural, that first time you see Batman. He's walking in and out of smoke and disappearing. It looks like he can fly. It looks like he's bulletproof. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
but
Right.
he's not.
Good point.
You see what I'm saying? And that's what I get with Gabriel from that first introduction scene, because each time after that, they never one time tried to make him look like he was a ghost or anything or a demonic kind of thing again.
Right.
Other than probably trying to make her think that it was a figment of her imagination because
Yeah.
she's seeing this stuff.
Right.
But all of those kills were very organic, very human on human kind of kills. But like I said, this film was something that James Wan has said that he was leaning into the camp of like a 70s horror film. And if you actually look at the way this film begins to the way it ends, that is exactly what it feels like I got. And that's
Yeah.
why I told you guys last week, I was like, look, when it feels like it's campy,
Yeah.
that was on purpose.
And,
Right.
and,
Right.
and that's why I said that it felt like I was watching a movie from the Blockbuster days, because that's exactly that was a feel, no question. Now we're way over time, but one thing I've got to
Yes.
talk about was once Gabriel has been revealed and he's peering out the back of her head,
Yeah.
and that whole
Yes.
fight scene in the jail cell happens,
Oh
man.
my god.
I mean, did you take a close look of how this chick was fighting? She was fighting backwards.
Yeah.
Backwards.
It was the most bizarre thing because
And
you
that
could see
was-
her face.
And that was something. It's funny
Yeah.
you say that because I picked up on that again in the scene where the cop was chasing him in the second act. The way that he was
Yes.
moving, it kind of
Same.
looked to me. I didn't know it, but there was something where I was like, it looks like he's kind of moving backwards.
Something's off, right? That's
And
when you
that's
talk
exactly what it was. That
Lord
was
of the
really
Ring.
interesting to
Yeah.
watch the I don't know if you want to call it the choreography, but just the way
Yeah.
that he moves, because he is literally in the back of her head, and so that's so when he's taking over, her back is his front, and so like her limbs contort and like you hear the bones cracking and
Yeah.
Oh my god,
but
it was so awesome.
it's that but like I said, it's that combined with almost like this Matrix like movement and like gunplay
Very
and
staccato,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then
It- I
quick
mean, it's
too at the
wild.
same time.
Yeah,
They
we
said
I
it was
gotta
a
tell
wild
you,
third
I
act, and
actually
it's wild.
figured it out. I did nail it.
Did you really?
Because I did. I figured it out about 20, 30 minutes beforehand. Definitely before we saw any of the VHS tapes.
Really?
I turned to my wife and I said, Gabriel's coming at the back of her head, and her husband broke it open when he slammed her against the
Wow.
wall because she was bleeding. Because I kept saying, "Damn, she's still bleeding." I was like, when she woke up, like
Yeah.
while Gabriel was doing the killing, I was like, "That's pretty bad," but I didn't figure it out. The one thing that took me a minute, but once I went, "Hey, Gabriel was in the back of her head and everything there." Once I hit that, I said, "I bet that random chick that Gabriel kidnaps her mom." And
Yeah.
I told all of this to Crystal, and she was like, and when I said it to her, she like looked at me, and you're like, "What?"
That's
And she
like,
was like,
that's
"What?
like the first
Like,
time,
that's insane."
that's like the first time I watched The Sixth Sense, and my girlfriend at the time turns to me about halfway, not even, maybe a third of the way through the movie, and she goes, "You don't think he's dead, do you?" And I went, "No,
Oh
God,
man.
no, of course not." But oh,
Well, you're not
son
gonna
of
believe
a
this.
bitch! And then from that point forward, I knew the dude was dead, and then it just wasn't. It ruined the
Yes.
movie for me. Oh, spoilers for The
Will,
Sixth Sense.
no lie, that's actually happened to me too. Get this. No one had spoiled The Sixth Sense for me because this was back before the internet still like was crazy with spoilers, and so I didn't really know. Like I didn't know. I never saw it in theaters.
Wow.
I hadn't seen it when it came out on video.
Sorry if I
And the
ruined
only
it.
thing is, every time it was brought up to me, people would say, "Oh, you're gonna really like it," and then they just wouldn't spoil it for me. Like no one would, right?
Right.
It literally was playing on the Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night on freaking ABC. I've made it to the point where it's on broadcast television
Yeah.
without anyone ruining it for me.
That's years.
And it's starting out, right? And then it's only because the internet wasn't there. Like 1 hour on the internet after this movie dropped that Friday, and everybody would have known.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm watching it, and it's literally the moment that Bruce Willis gets shot at the beginning. My sister's walking by, and she says, "Oh man, isn't it crazy when you find out he's a ghost in the end?"
Oh Jesus!
And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" and so the whole movie, I'm like, "Yep, he's not even talking to her." Yep,
Yeah.
I just see it all, and so like I've never had that experience.
Yep.
But here's the thing:
I was there with you.
bringing up The Sixth Sense is perfect because I think that if anybody ruins Malignant for you, or you know what it's about beforehand,
Yeah.
you are not going to have the same experience that people did. And here's the thing:
100.
I'm not even saying you're gonna love it with the going in cold, but if you go into it already knowing the spoilers, there's no way this movie hits the same way.
Yep.
Because that's like Will said, I think I know what I'm getting. Okay, I think I figured this out. This makes more sense on this now. What the hell is this?
Yes.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it just that's exactly how it gets. Once you get to that third act, it's like all bets are off, man. Leave, it's because here's my thing. Like I said, I figured it out, but there's no way I would have figured it out going. It was nowhere near what I thought the movie was going to be when I pressed play.
Right.
No. And I have to say too, on the subject of the twist, like it's not my favorite twist that I've ever seen in a movie.
Nope.
It's not the most
Fair.
unexpected twist that I've ever seen in a movie. And I haven't seen all of James Wan's films, but I actually do really like the original Saw, the first one.
I do too.
And the sequels I think are trash, but I love the first one. And
That was a solid twist.
and I was gonna say the first Saw movie, in just my opinion, I prefer that twist because I guess I'm a less is more guy, and Saw the first one. The first one is more of a less is more movie than Malignant is, for sure.
Right, for sure.
Well,
So
I like
that's
the-
just my personal taste, but you're right. If you know the twist going in, this movie is probably not gonna really do anything for you on any level because, as we've
Right.
said, the first two acts really are just kind of what they are. I mean, there's a purpose for them,
Yep.
but it's to set you up for that twist. And
That's, yep.
the characters are very kind of nondescript. Like we said, there are no real stars in this movie. And in fact, as I was watching it, I texted Tom, and if anyone's seen the movie, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I was like, "Oh, I see they got not Allison Brie as the main character, and one of the cops is not Wanda Sykes."
Not
Like,
Wanda Sykes.
I could tell who they were trying to, like, the caricatures they were trying to emulate with the people that they cast, which was kind of distracting to me. But
And I got to tell you, I gotta tell you, I would have liked this movie more if they had actually gotten Alison
Alison
Brie
Brie
and
and Wanda
Wanda
Sykes.
Sykes.
Yeah.
Like if they had just spun the movie, and I also feel like the lead detective, if they could have gotten like John Cho or whatever, like I'm just saying, like you could there's an A-list cast in here for this movie,
That's kind
but I
of
still
what
don't know how you could have gotten them to sign on to this
right.
shit.
That's kind of what I meant by wanting the first couple of acts to be a little more interesting. Like I feel like it could have been a little better if they had maybe put a couple of names in it instead of just
Mhm.
distracting me with like the Kmart knockoffs. No offense. Like
But at the same time, though, the whole nostalgia thing would have been ruined, I think.
That is true.
that's fair.
I agree with
That's
that.
fair.
I agree
That's
with
fair.
that.
Because I mean, I mean, again, there is a purpose. He's playing off of
Yeah.
the old horror movies that was a classic thing. They would cast no names. They would become names a lot of times later on.
Right.
Mhm.
Jamie
But
Lee
you're
Curtis.
right. I mean that is very true.
Yep.
That is
Yeah.
true.
All right. So, last thing before we close this out, is this the next Saw?
No.
No,
No.
I don't think
You don't,
so.
I'd be
you don't see
surprised
Gabriel
if
coming
there's
back?
a sequel to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. Yeah, especially because, like, again, I love the first Saw. I think it was really inventive and really original, and nowhere near as gory as the sequels. And
No.
also, like Paranormal Activity. I think movies like that. I'm usually a big fan of the first one, but then they just spawn all these sequels that I totally get why they happen. Because again, brings us back to the whole money conversation in
I was,
Hollywood. But I
I
think
was,
it just it bastardizes and it kind of for me some like it doesn't necessarily like destroy the original. I still love the original, but it can kind of dilute it and take away kind of what
right.
made the first one special if you just let it stand on its own.
And I agree. And to your point, we're going back to the very beginning of the podcast. We're talking about the whole IATSE strike, right? But
Hmm.
I didn't ask if you wanted there to be
Sure.
this to be the
Do you
next
think
Saw.
it is?
Do you think it is? Because Hollywood has a knack of saying James
Yeah.
Wan won't do it. We'll find someone else who will.
It's a possibility. I
That's
guess we'll
true.
have to see how much money it makes.
Yeah.
It was a $40 million budget according to Wikipedia, and also according
Oh my God, that's like you paid for like one Tom Hanks.
yeah, like and also and again according to Wikipedia it says so far the box office is 24.6 million. I don't know how they do the streaming bit of it, so
Right.
I'm not sure exactly how they track that in terms of success and if that will, because obviously if it makes a crap load of money somebody's going to at least want to do another one even if they don't end up doing it.
Right.
Someone's going to want to do it. They're going to try to push it through.
Yep.
That's just
Yep.
the way it is.
Yep.
That's I agree with that, but my thing is I don't think it's going to have the income to get. I think at the least, I think we'll see Malignant at its best will break even. Okay, because
Yep.
unfortunately, because of the timing of it, I think I will say this. I think if it opened in theaters under normal circumstances without being, unfortunately, even though I love the HBO Max same day releases. I love them. I just do. Um, but it does undercut it, I think, at the box office. Because my thing is this: there's no way in hell I would have paid money to go see this movie off of the trailer. I'm not
Until
gonna lie to you.
until you heard the
I,
buzz,
until I heard the buzz,
and then you
yeah,
would
like
rush to the theater at that point.
and then it would probably take yeah, it would take a friend of mine, and that's what it was. I had some really close friends, or a really close friend of mine, who was like, "Oh my God, have you seen *Malignant*? I feel like," and I was like, "No, I haven't. I wasn't like it wasn't even on my radar because I saw like a trailer for it, and I figured that movie out when I watched the trailer. I didn't need to see that. I'd seen that before."
Yep.
And she was like, "No, no. I've heard it's unbelievably. It's not what you think it is. I'm going to watch it tonight. You should watch it too. We've got to talk about it."
Right.
And so I did that. And but like I said, but I think that if it were under normal circumstances with theater and only a $40 million budget, Malignant would have easily made its money back
And then some.
at this, and then some, and then yes, you probably would have a Malignant franchise that at the very least is a streaming video on demand kind of thing.
Right.
But I think right now with the timing that this movie is, anybody who's seen it'll be a cult classic. That's what Malignant's best hopes and chances are, because like I said, because it's polarizing and it's so different in its own kind of thing. There are people that are going to be like me that are like, I know this isn't the greatest film, but there are just too many things I love about this,
Right.
and just again, the insanity of it all. I love it. I just love the fact that James Wan was allowed to make this movie with Warner Brothers money.
Yep. Nope,
Respect the balls.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Fair
exactly.
Point. Fair point. Well, gentlemen, that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yes.
I don't
That
know.
was fun.
I don't know if I expected it to be as much fun as I had when we first picked this movie to be the subject of this show, but I had a lot of fun. So thank you guys for that.
I think we've
You're
had
welcome.
a good. I think we've had a good string of movies to review so far. But
I think we have too. But what are we going to watch for this next week? What are you guys thinking?
I don't know.
We'll
I
have to
have
talk
no
about it
ideas
offline.
as of this moment.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe
Yeah.
Cry Macho.
Cry Macho. Oh, the Clint Eastwood one.
Maybe.
That's on HBO
It
Max.
is on
It
HBO
is.
Max. We
It
got
is.
a string of HBO Maxes.
Yeah, something to think about.
That's the movie that they're promoting by letting you know that Clint Eastwood is like the best ever and definitely is in this movie.
Yes.
Well, what's the movie about? Clint Eastwood is in the movie.
Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is really old, and he's talking to a guy who's really young.
Yeah,
Right.
who's really young.
And he's
About
still,
what though?
and he still
About-
has the voice. He's still got
Yeah.
the voice. So
About life.
Yeah, no.
we gotta go.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, we got to wrap it up.
Yes.
Guys, I've had a great time. Of course, one last plea. Of course, I hope if you're even listening to this and I make this last plea to tell you to go watch Malignant, that you skipped all of the spoiler stuff. Like, why are you still here? I told you not to listen.
Right.
I told you not to listen.
And if
But
you
if
are
you
here-
haven't, then go watch it.
And if you're
Yeah.
here and you haven't watched it, then you may as well not bother because we just spoiled the shit
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But
Just know that you missed out on a great time.
yep. You should just listen to us in the first place.
But I do want to say real quick before we get out of here, we've got a YouTube channel, Let's Get Real. We have an email address, letsgetreelmoviepod@gmail.com. If you're listening and if there's a movie you want us to watch, please email us. If
Yeah.
there's a topic you want us to talk about, please shoot us an email. Just wanted to get
Leave
that
us
out
some
there.
comments and some likes. Subscribe to us.
Yeah,
there
if you
on
think we're
YouTube.
crazy, if you think we're stupid, tell us. Just engage. We just want to
Yep.
hear whatever
And
you got to
we're
say.
We're working on a Speak Pipe account so that you guys can leave your voicemails too. We can play them back on the show. So more information on that
Awesome.
later. So.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for your time. It was a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Of course,
Absolutely.
next week, guys.
All right. Until then, it's been Let's Get Real.